In the next scene, we'll show Arvid dancing, carrying a swing record. He's caught for obvious reasons and chained by the HJ member, whose Arvid attacks and tries to run away. He gets beat up by the HJ agents, which include Emil, for his love of music made by blacks and Jews, which he has because of his status as an Omega male. He is a cripple, and as a result has a very low sexual marketplace value as compared to the more master race style of his peers. As a result, he associates their music, the German music, with with being like an alpha male, which he can't do. So that's why he hates their music, and he substitutes it with his own individual preference. In the HJ Academy, as a result of this, we see Thomas in the boxing ring attempt to defeat Emil as a sort of vengeance for what he did to his friend. And this fails miserably as Emil's trained more, and we learn that Emil's now sees being in the HJ as a better outlet with which he can fulfill his self-interest. Hence the quote, I just smartened up or whatever. That's not a quote. I messed up there. But I'm not going to fix it. I lost my place. And after the fight, we see the boys in Arvid's room, in which Thomas, the ultimate individualist, claims the HJ lessons and Arvid's room are both boring. Truly a centrist. When he does this, because Arvid purity tests him. He purity tests the dude who fights another dude to reclaim his honor. Which this is sort of dumb to do. And this makes you believe that Thomas had a point earlier where he claimed Arvid has a superiority complex. It stems from his supposed better taste in music, because in reality he's just as brainwashed as anyone else he claims to oppose. Throughout the movie, we see Arvid has a high sense of self-importance to compensate for his status as a cripple, and that's why people don't like him. Later, we go to Thomas's house, and we see his father's a national conservative bourgeois sort of person, and he opposes Hitler's more pro-worker syndicalist politics, where Nazi Germany, Hitler basically made every German employee join. Well, he didn't make them, but he incentivized it highly to join his German Workers Union, or whatever it was called. It was one of those powerful unions in the time period, and it did a lot of good things for workers. They had government support and everything, and it drastically increased the quality of life for the workers there. And his father, he doesn't seem to like that, and so he doesn't like Hitler, because he's clearly very wealthy and not a worker. He's like a doctor or something. And the biggest flaw in fascism is it isn't radical enough. It always stamps out, select groups, and not the problem, that being capitalist. While, a lot of groups, like Jews, for example, make up a substantial portion of the capitalists, many will side with some regime like the Nazis to maintain power. In fact, if you look at most of Hitler's assassination attempts, most of them were by conservative nationalists who were very wealthy before Hitler took power and sort of did his more pro-worker policies. Because they want the government more. Like Thomas's father, he sort of seems some sort of victim, but if he had his way, the government would be a lot more oppressive than what Hitler did to it. It's sort of a rotten banana, He's brown on the outside, fascist on the outside, but he's yellow on the inside. That's sort of a comparison I came up with writing the script here. The next thing we see Thomas is he's at another swing party, and Peter sees the girl from the record store earlier. The one that he just sits around in a record store to brag about his taste in music. And he dances for her, but they're caught. And because they're HJs, it would be terrible for them to be caught. So they go out the back door. And we proceed to see a montage where Peter and Thomas. We see a montage of Peter and Thomas in the HJ Educational Facility, and we learn that even though the Jews look white, they are of different ethnicity, and thus have a different ethnic self-interest to the whites. Thus, when Jews are in a position of power or more resources than the white workers or just normal people, they're going to support different policies. Because they have more power, that just results in a system where you have different competing self-interest. Therefore, the ethnic and racial collectivism of the Nazis makes sense as it would allow people with different ethnicities to have a different self-interest. Of course, this isn't what happened in the real world. Hitler was anti-white. And the movie shows us in an emotional... And how the movie counters him is just with the average liberal response, which is an emotional, pseudo-scientific way to make sure the audience knows that it's false, and he should never believe what these movies here are saying, even though they might have a valid point, but you're supposed to assume it's wrong. And we also grows closer with Peter and Thomas as well. Peter meets with Knopf, who congratulates him on his good work, but tells him to stop working for the bookstore, as the man there might be doing something illegal, and using him to deliver things besides books. Later in the bookstore, we see it as a special version of Faust has birth certificates that allow Jews to hide from the authorities, and we see he is delivered. This is a really interesting choice of book, as fascism is a Faustian ideology. Oswald Spengler says that white people are the Faustian race or ethnicity, as the symbol of whites people is sort of like the infinity symbol or something. I've never read Oswald Spengler, but I've watched one video about him. By the way, if you think I'm an expert on Oswald Spengler, but he sort of talks about how whites have this sort of ambition to achieve the infinite. And, that's with, he says Faustian. So it's kind of odd for them to choose Faust, the book Faust, as some sort of, anti-Nazi thing. Though Oswald Spengler actually did not support the Nazis, even though the Nazis supported Oswald Spengler, which, that's sort of interesting. I'm just going to see what this button does real quick. Okay, didn't do anything. Let me find my place. And so Perry's sending false certificates that allow Jews to hide from authorities, and C is delivered. And he talks to the woman we see earlier to deliver too. And C was sending her fake birth certificates, and she mentions all the Jewish professors. And they talk about how she mentions all the Jewish professors were exposed. He has to say over the validity of this, in which he has the position that she doesn't have any proof they didn't deserve expulsion. And she falls on appeal to human rights. Which that's not a good argument. That's not an argument. And he shows how he resents his father for the economic hardship. How he resents that they put their family through as an existential crisis. He feels betrayed by the bookkeeper, and he meets Thomas on the bridge, who reaffirms his earlier statement that by being in the HJ and going to swing clubs, they're able to live a fulfilled existence. However, Peter's distraught from earlier. I lost my place, I don't know how. And still paranoid. And he suspects Thomas has been sent to talk to him and make this making Thomas uneasy. This makes Thomas uneasy. And the next thing we see, the HJ agent is able to denounce people. Thomas denounces his father for his overly conservative views. And we also see the petty bourgeois store owner has been denounced for his classical economic positions. Later in the club, we see Arvid is playing music, mainly foreign music. A Nazi soldier gives him a song request of a German song, causing him to an autistic rage, where he claims he doesn't play for money. The Nazis are killing Austrians en masse, which they didn't do. Austria actually voted to join Germany, and he is combating against the nationalism of the Nazis by not playing music somehow. And he proceeds to virtue signal how opposed to Nazis he is. Angering Thomas, he tells him they're coming for him next. In this scene, Thomas claims the Jewish music has corrupted Arvid's mind, which isn't true. Arvid is corrupted by his disabilities and his slave morals. Another point Thomas brings up is how Arvid does not mention cripples in his list of people Nazis are persecuting, which is sort of a point on how cosmopolitan Arvid is. He's not able to find any cause in his self-interest to really identify with, instead identifying with his temporary passions and interests, which is why he doesn't mention cripples, even though they were being persecuted as a cripple. Like, you'd think he'd say that. Peter confronts Thomas over his changed worldview, calling it propaganda, and attacks him after hearing an insult directed at his father. And the next thing we see Arvid entering the bathtub, slitting his wrist and ending his life to protest the Nazis government. Later we see Peter spurg about Knopf and his tendencies towards non-nationalistic or non-German culture and philosophy. Peter doesn't like Nazis now, as he's affected emotionally by the death of his friend, which he blames on them. And we see Thomas's father took away and get a glimpse of him at a Hitler rally. And later we see Thomas confront Peter's house about his recent behavior, resulting in Thomas almost threatening to report Peter. Peter delivers packages of people's ashes to their families, an event that did not occur in real life Nazi Germany, causing him great distress. He discusses with the woman from earlier, his late father, and she reads a letter about how people must oppose Hitler and embrace humanism. It doesn't really explain why, but the audience is expected to automatically side with this letter because it paints corporatist Germany in an unrealistically negative light. So it'll make the audience automatically agree. Like, they never give any good arguments against Hitler's policies. Towards the end of the film, we see Peter and Thomas fighting after a swing dance he was at in his crash, starting Thomas, who was armed with a weapon, winning for obvious reasons, and Peter lets himself get captured, and in the most moving scene in the film, announces his preference for individualism over the cultural suppression of the German government. I was going to do an analysis, sort of an overall analysis for this video, but I'll just make a third video probably right now.